Hello, hello, hello! My name is Artemis_Anime, and today I am reading A Robin's Nest by SilvermistAnimeLover. Chapter 9 Training. Summary. I've posted a new MHA story called Viridian, so if you don't know, go check it out. I've also created a group chat for my MHA readers on an app called Telegram, so if you want to, go check it out. There's a revision of this story coming. I've come back through and added in stuff, and I have no idea if this site will treat it like an update or not, so be prepared for that. I apologize in advance. I'll try to get it out with Chapter 10 just in case. I've had a ton of people tell me that certain old heroes may still be alive. I know! Izuku hasn't really thought about it though. Rest assured, I have a plan. Just stick with me. I don't know much about the other Robins, so I've chosen not to mention them in this story. You may read it as if they don't exist, or that they're there but not mentioned. Plus, Izuku would be really hurt if Bruce tried to replace him and gave his title, a nickname from his dead mother, to some stranger that he didn't even know. Chapter 9 Training. Izuku has been training his ass off in preparation of the sports festival and his swiftly approaching provisional license exam. His teachers were giving him a lot more work, likely to cram in a few semesters' worth of information before the exam, but they'd also started treating him like an equal. He found it refreshing, and was allowed to go into the staff room for coffee whenever he didn't have class. The first class, after his big reveal, was odd. The teachers would sneak odd glances at him when they thought nobody was looking, and whenever they passed him in halls, they'd send him a secretive smile or a nod in respect. Some of his classmates had noticed too, and they didn't hesitate in asking him what had happened during the Yosuke incidents. "So, the rumors say that you took on a villain by yourself," Ashido grinned as she leaned against Izuku's desk. "Is it true?" Izuku wasn't sure how to answer this. And damn it, Aizawa was smirking behind his scarf as he pretended to sleep in the corner. "Yeah, I saw you fighting him from the stairs. You are amazing. How'd you do that?" Zero grinned. "That damn Deku couldn't fight for if his life depended on it," Bakugo huffed, and Aizawa twitched from his spot on the floor. "Though, if you recall, I still nearly beat you during our little match on the first day," Izuku smirked, and Bakugo glared death at him. "Izu." Asui stood up from her desk and made her way over to Izuku. Then, to the surprise of the room, she bowed. "You saved my life. You jumped in front of a villain and took a hit that would have killed me." She looked up at him with a smile. "I'll find a way to repay you someday." "Really, there's no need." Izuku sent her a gentle smile. "You were in trouble, and what kind of person would I be if I let someone I cared about get hurt?" "Wait, so you really fought that guy alone?" Ashido gasped. "Should I tell them?" Izuku asked Ejiro with a raised eyebrow. "I mean, they won't leave it alone anyway, so..." "Cool. So, you know that vigilante, Robin?" "Yeah, I'm him." The room stared at him in disbelief for a moment, before laughing. It brought back some memories of his middle school days that weren't too kind. Luckily, it seemed Aizawa did care enough to back him up on this. "Quiet down." His voice carried through the classroom, silencing the students instantaneously. "As if Deku could be anything," Bakugo muttered, just loud enough for Izuku to hear. "And for the record, he's telling the truth," Aizawa continued, sending Bakugo and a few others pointed looks. "Midoriya is the vigilante Robin, and my apprentice, so he's legal now. This is why I asked for his help in fighting the villains during the attack, because he has got the experience needed to not die. If something like that ever happens again and I'm not around, you listen to him." The classroom was silent for a long moment, and Izuku fidgeted in his chair as his classmates stared at him in awe. Jeez, what would they do if they knew I was an old hero? "Now, let's get homeroom over with so I can get back to my nap, which you lot so rudely interrupted." Even All Might was treating him with more respect, which was most welcomed. The hero classes were mostly independent study too, so everyone had time to train for the sports festival. "All Might?" Izuku asked, walking up to the man during his heroic study. Yes, Midoriya." He seemed a little scared? Intimidated? Was the name Robin really so well respected? He decided to chalk it up to him being an actual old hero more than anything else. "I was hoping that I could spend this class period working on some stuff in Power Loader's workshop." "Of course." Go right ahead. All Might smiled at him as Izuku thanked him and went off to find the support course's classroom. It was in a separate building, likely as a precaution, so if something happened, it would only be one building that blew up rather than the entire school. He was wandering around the hallways, somewhat lost, when he literally walked right into a pink-haired girl, nearly bowling her right over. He caught her in the nick of time, preventing her from smacking her head on the floor. Izuku hadn't been Bruce's ward for nothing, and he'd pick up a few smooth lines in his time with the billionaire playboy. Kicking a girl as she was about to fall was one of them. Whoa, you all right there? Izuku asked, a bright smile on his face. She stared for a moment as he helped her back to her feet before smiling back up at him. Yeah, so sorry about that. I got too caught up thinking about my babies. She got this obsessive look in her eye that Izuku instantly recognized. Oh, she's an inventor. You wouldn't happen to know where I could find Power Loader, would you? This place is harder to navigate when you come through the front door. Air shafts are a lot simpler. Of course I do. You're a hero student, right? Shied his costume. Oh, you're the one who had the cape redo. How's that working out? I'm the one who made your gear, though my classmates worked on your clothing. How are my babies doing? Babies? Oh, your inventions, Izuku realized. Yeah, they're doing amazing. In fact, I'm here to make some babies of my own. He grinned. She was a little eccentric, but he thought they'd get along just fine. Oh? Like what? Can I help? Maybe, Izuku smirked. Depends. How do you feel about jetpacks? The girl's grin would have frightened anyone else, but Izuku shared it with one of his own. They bounced ideas and concepts back and forth as she led him to wherever Power Loader was. They were in the middle of discussing the fine mechanics of a hoverboard when they arrived. Power Loader took one look at the two animated students and paled. No, dear God, Nezu, if the school's gone by Monday, it is not my fault. Oh, hey, Power Loader. I was hoping to use my hero class time to work on a few things today. Would that be okay? I'll help, the girl chimed in. Just please don't blow anything up, he sighed, defeated. Izuku was somewhat offended. I'll have you know that I only blow things up on accident when I'm making explosives, and I've gotten a lot better, too. I haven't blown anything up since that microcycle incident. Power Loader shifted, uncomfortable. I don't mean you, Midoriya. His gaze shifted to the pink-haired girl whose name he'd forgotten to ask. Come on, I only blew up something twice a class period, she huffed, and Izuku had to stifle his laugh. Maybe I can help? If we work together, we're sure to create some wonderful inventions without giving Power Loader gray hairs. If you can keep her from blowing up things until the sports festival, I'll give you your own workshop, Midoriya, Power Loader promised. Really? Oh, you can just call me Robin if you want, or Dick. Either work, Izuku shrugged. Dick? He questioned, confused. It's an American name for Richard. No clue why, but I went by it when I was with my mentor. I like the name Robin. I'm Hatsune Mei. The girl introduced herself with an excited grin. Midoriya Izuku, Hero Class 1A. Hero name? Robin. He grinned. Robin, you're free to use my workshop. Here's the key, don't bother giving it back. I know you'd find a way to pick the lock anyhow. Power Loader smiled as he tossed Robin the key. As long as you can keep Hatsune under control, she can join you. Yes! Hatsune cheered. Izuku grinned, ignoring the shiver that went down Power Loader's spine. He'd start work on some of his more versatile Robin gear, before working on some of his other projects, like his bike. And then, the Batmobile. After all, if he could build it, then he could finally drive it, right? Mamachi Higori wasn't sure what to think of Midoriya Izuku. For one, he was the old hero, Robin, one of the most well-respected heroes of all time, right alongside his mentor, the Dark Knight. Robin was famous for being one of the youngest heroes, and one of the notable ones without power. And to think that same old hero is actually a student at UA, and that same student wanted to use Higori's workshop, he was honored. This kid, for he was still technically a child, was one of Higori's favorite heroes, because of his rumored expert hacking and programming skills. Robin was said to be an incredible inventor that never got the chance to fully come into his skills. He wanted to change that. If he could help nurture the inner inventor somehow, then by God he would, even if it cost him a few labs. But when he saw Robin walk in with Hatsume, of all people, his own problem child, as Aizawa would say, he felt true fear. The girl was brilliant, one of the best inventive minds he had ever seen in years. But she was also fearless. She had little regard for her own safety and often blew up his lab. He'd quickly learned that even by the end of the first day, that she was one to keep a very close eye on. Maybe he'd given her a lab of her own next semester, just to keep her from blowing up the shared ones. But if Midoriya could curb that nasty habit of hers... Either way, he was honestly excited to just see what the two could come up with when they put their heads together. An old hero, working with what could possibly be the brightest support student he'd ever had. He could practically hear Nezu cackling. Oh wait, that was Midoriya. Never mind. He watched the two work with the same attentiveness as an overprotective mother. By the end of the first hour, he'd lost track of how many explosions Robin had averted. He supposed he should start building that lab for the kids soon. By the end of the second hour, the two hardly needed to speak anymore. Their teamwork was phenomenal, and Haguri had never seen anything like it before. The two practically read one another's minds. If he hadn't known any better, he'd say they'd been working together for years. By the end of the third hour, had Haguri convinced, he'd build them both a lab to share. These two would be regulars down there for sure. The way they worked together and didn't need to communicate at all anymore, and whenever they did talk, it was almost gibberish to Haguri. Plus, Robin had managed to keep Hatsume from blowing up a single thing. 3 hours and not one explosion. That was more than enough to convince him. Haguri was certain. These two could easily take over the world if they wanted. He was just glad they wanted to be, or work for in Hatsume's place, heroes. Well, Robin had the key now, so he was sure he'd be seeing a lot more of them. Maybe Aizawa would let him steal some of that headache medicine he kept in the staff room. 13 shifted from foot to foot. They were excited. 13 had grown up idolizing old heroes, and the way they'd rescued people. It wasn't about publicity or fame or anything of the sort back then. Just helping people. Every hero was pretty much a rescue hero in those days. It was what inspired 13 to become one in the first place, despite having such a destructive quirk. To think that they would be able to not only meet an old hero, but teach them? If someone had told 13 that at the beginning of the school year, they would have called that person insane. But here they are. All the staff members had agreed to use the 3-hour-long hero course period to teach Midoriya privately in preparation for the upcoming provisional licensing exam. Normally, hero students wouldn't start learning the ins and outs of things like rescue work until at least the second semester. The USJ trip was more of a way to start familiarizing them with the different types of disaster and how to initially respond, rather than actual hands-on rescuing. But for Midoriya, since he was actually taking the exam in a few weeks, he'd need as much hands-on rescue training as he could get, along with a crash course on how much the laws regarding rescue work have changed in the last 3.5 centuries. Midnight felt like they should be stressed, with everything they needed to teach the student in such a short period of time, but they were more excited than anything. After all, how often did one get to train one of their favorite heroes? Aizawa-senpai had insisted on coming along, likely because of the USJ incident not too long ago. While Midoriya had finally been able to remove his bandages, Aizawa would probably still look like a mummy for the sports festival. Midoriya's shoulder could pose an issue though, but they didn't address it when it actually came to be a problem. 13 and Aizawa both found themselves impressed with just how good the kid was at rescue work already. He knew several different kinds of techniques for different kinds of terrains and disasters, and was able to think on his feet every time 13 threw him a curveball. Whenever they ran into a scenario, he always remained calm and comforting, exuding a confidence that would undoubtedly put a frightened civilian at ease, and maybe even make a few children laugh. His knowledge of field treatment was astounding, and 13 wondered if he learned it first-hand experience. Although, the way the kid casually mentioned that it was easier to do stitches on another person than on oneself made the hero worry. Hero or not, kids shouldn't ever have to give himself stitches, especially without anything for the pain. So, what kind of injuries can you treat? Aizawa asked, eyes narrowing a little as he looked at Midoriya. Robin, as he insisted they call him in costume. Just the typical stuff, really. I can set most broken bones, relocate stuff, remove foreign objects, pack wounds, stitches, and some basic emergency surgery, wrap wounds, stop bleedings, the basics, he shrugged. I can also whip up antidotes fairly quick for poisons and toxins, so long as I've got my cure and a sample of what they came with. He thought for a moment. I should rebuild my portable toxin lab so I can do that in the field. Never know when you're going to run into a villain with a toxic or poisonous quirk. How is that basic? 13 echoed, and Aizawa seemed to be in a similar mindset. Kid, I don't think you realize just what basic medical treatment is for hero these days. Aizawa sighed. Wrapping wounds, making splints, don't let people with concussions fall asleep, stem bleeding, and don't let someone take an object out of someone who's been prepared. And how to use things like liquid glue and butterfly closure. That's pretty much what a fully trained hero doctor needs to know. Everything else is what a doctor or medical hero would take care of. That's it? Robin blinked in disbelief. I guess it makes sense, though. You could go to hospitals here. Back in my time, you couldn't go to a hospital as a hero. We weren't exactly legal, especially those like myself and Batman, who had to protect our identities. That meant we needed to treat our own injuries ourselves, no matter how bad they were. And I couldn't always count on being able to get back to the Batcave for treatment. Plus, we couldn't always rely on medical personnel being able to reach the injured civilians first. 13 noticed this early on. Robin had the tendency to refer to his time in the pre-quirked era as his time, as if it was there where he actually belonged, rather than here. Not that 13 could blame him, what with the bullying the child had undoubtedly suffered through. Society wasn't nice to quirkless people, so 13 imagined that the pre-quirked era was something like a dream world to him, a place where he could finally be normal. I expect that if you get hurt at any point, you will come to a teacher or recovery girl. Aizawa crossed his arms. Hi, Aizawa-sensei, Robin sighed. Good, 13 nodded. Now in cases of a mass villain attack. And the lesson continued. Yes, Midoriya was an exceptional student, but 13 couldn't help but think that he needed some kind of rescuing himself. They'd be there for him, though. All of the teachers would be. Because whether the others admitted it or not, this child was growing on all of them. He was becoming more of a student. He was becoming their friend, a part of their family, and they could do anything to protect him. Kanshiguro hadn't known what to expect when he first met Midoriya Izuku. The little detail of him being an old hero, while exciting, wasn't really a big deal. He didn't know why everyone was tripping over themselves. Yeah, it was cool and all, but at the end it just meant that their student had more experience than he thought. That he was an equal. It wasn't really fair to thrust this mantle of practically god-level worship on a kid. At least Aizawa had the right idea. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't fascinated by the stories the kid held, though. He, Snipe, and Ectoplasm were training the kid in combat. Aizawa tagged along because he was really good at hand-to-hand combat. He'd known that the kid was good. He had to be good to not only be a successful old hero, but to be a successful modern vigilante. But that didn't mean any of them were expecting Robin to pin Aizawa face down in the dirt in 5 minutes flat. Even if the man hadn't been using his capture weapon, this kid was damn good. He shared an expressed look with Ectoplasm and Snipe while Aizawa grinned. After 2 hours of hard training, Ectoplasm had used his quirk to test Robin's ability to fight multiple enemies at once. To watch the kid had excelled, while Snipe tested the kid's reaction time to the distant foes. Sakura had called a well-earned break. Damn, kid, you're much better than I expected. We might not have to teach you here. Shakuro grinned as he sat down to enjoy his bento alongside the others. Snipe laughed. I'd like to see how well you can shoot, too. I've never actually shot a gun before, Robin admitted, and Snipe drew back in surprise. He paused for a moment before pulling out his gun and cautiously handing it over. You know gun safety? Yeah, Robin grinned, holding the weapon carefully. Sakura could tell this kid was very familiar with what guns could do. They may not be common like they were in the pre-quirked era, but they were still just as dangerous. He watched in interest as Snipe set up a few things for Robin to shoot at. Okay, kid, fire away. Don't worry too much about the sound. I got mufflers on the end. All right. Robin took a deep breath before holding up the gun. He aimed, then fired 6 shots in rapid succession. Shakiro breathed in shock as ectoplasm and Aizawa choked on the rifle. Snipe looked like Christmas had come early. Robin hit all 6 targets dead in the center. I thought you said you'd never shot one before. Shakiro managed to get out. I haven't. I just went with my instinct, I suppose. It isn't too different from aiming with my grappling gun, he mused, carefully handing the weapon back to an excited Snipe. You gotta think about wind resistance, distance, force, all of it, and calculate everything in a moment. Because if you get it wrong and the hook doesn't catch, then there really isn't much to save you from a 10-story fall, you know? Yeah, I'm mighty impressed, sharpshooter. Snipe laughed as he whacked Robin on the back in a friendly manner. The kid stumbled and stiffened for a moment before grinning. Come on, problem child. You need to eat. Aizawa herded his students over to their eating area. You hate me on guts yet? Sekiguro asked, a teasing smile on his face. They were working him hard after all. Are you kidding? Robin grinned up at him. I'm having a blast. I love fighting new people. It gives me a chance to try out new techniques. You can't just spar about with the same old enemies, you know? You say it like you didn't take out Aizawa in 5 minutes, Ectoplasm chuckled as Sethiro flushed. Nah, that's just because we're fighting in an open area. In an urban setting where he can use his capture weapon to move about freely, I would have had a much harder time of it, Robin argued. I'm good at adapting, but I'm still just a kid, even if I'm about 7 or so years older than I look. He smirked. Don't sell yourself short, problem child. You're almost too fast to see sometimes. Yeah, that's just because I had to keep up with Wally. He had a fond smile as he looked up at the sky. That's the kid Flash, right? Ectoplasm tilted his hat as he thought. Sometimes I forget you actually knew the old heroes. Sometimes you forget that I was one of them. Robin shook his head as he came out of his thoughts. Yeah, I knew the League pretty well. At one point, us younger sidekicks established a league of our own, but that's a bit of a different story. I wonder how everyone took my disappearance. The question was probably a bit heavier than the kid had intended, but it was a hard reminder that he'd lost everyone he held dear. The old stories say that Robin disappeared one night. Nobody knew where to, if he died or not. Many rumors sprang up, and he wasn't seen again. A lot of heroes went out to look to him, but to no avail. Aizawa spoke quietly. Gotham is still around, you know, Sekiguro added, and Robin's head whipped up in shock. It is? He blinked in shock. I wonder if the manor... No, it's been 3 centuries. There's no way it'd still be standing after all this time. He shook his head. I looked up a few things after you told us, Ectoplasm added. Wayne Manor is still there, preserved as far as I know. The mansion and the land where it sits was donated to someone by Bruce Wayne upon his death. Technically, the land and all his possessions are still in private, though nobody knows who owns it now. Is it? Robin got a faraway, wistful look to him. Maybe I should visit someday. You know, a class field trip to Gotham isn't such a bad idea. Aizawa mused, and Robin's head whipped up in shock. It wouldn't be until much later in the year, though, and Netsu would have to approve it. If you can get me to Gotham, for even a day. His bangs shadowed his eyes for a long moment before he swiped away a stray tear. I just want to say goodbye. They ate in silence after that, leaving the kid to his thoughts. The kid was strong in ways more than one, but he was still a kid who'd lost a lot. He felt a wave of protectiveness for the boy. He was alone and probably to some degree scared. He may not be able to help much, but he'd be there if the kid ever needed him. Because he was more than his student. This kid, Midoriya Izuku, felt like family to him. And Sekiguro would always protect his family. He shared a look with Snipe, Aizawa, and Ectoplasm. They would always protect him. Nezu grinned as he watched Midoriya work. The kid was brilliant. It'd been a long time since Nezu had a private student like this. But looking at the full extent of the analysis, the animal bouncing in his chair like a child. This was going to be fun, he decided, as he gave Midoriya several puzzles to test where he stood. Definitely fun. The boy had a certain animalistic aspect that Nezu loved. This instinct within him that he wasn't sure the boy himself even knew about. And for whatever reason, his inner bear? Yes, he decided the bear side of him was the one that was protective of this cub. Because as he got to know more about the student, he started to think of him as his little cub, a small cub that needed to be protected, no matter how well he could use his claws and fangs. And Nezu's inner rat was also curious about the human cub that had a keen intellect far beyond his peers. Nezu didn't often get protective of humans, but this boy was the exception to a lot of things, apparently. Not that the principal minded, of course. It'd just been a long time since he'd come across someone that his animal side liked so much. His grin widened. Nezu didn't play favorites, but it seemed Midoriya Izuku was always an exception. Ishiyama Ken, better known as Cementos, watched as Midoriya Izuku leapt around the urban training field like it was a playground. He looked so at home as he swung from skyscraper to skyscraper without a shred of fear. He was somewhat jealous. Ken himself was actually a little scared of heights. Not as afraid as he was of water, because his quirk made him sink like a literal rock. For the first time, he understood why the kid was called Robin. He certainly looked like one in the moment. He smiled as the kid let out a whoop of excitement and as he performed some complex aerial flip-like remover that had Aizawa, who was standing next to him, pale with worry. He hid his chuckle. Looked like the kid was growing on everyone on the staff. Yeah, keep going, kid. Kayama Namuri cheered as she clicked out a few more buttons. Obstacles suddenly jutted out of the walls of the building, forcing the boy to pull off some very risky, yet impressive-looking moves. The point of this training was to hone reflexes, and Ken's quirk was ideal for this sort of thing. He would make platforms and buildings shift and crumble to see how the kid would adapt, while Midnight would control the automatic obstacles that the training field came with. Aizawa was there to catch the kid if anything happened, but from the looks of it, didn't need to. Cementos had never seen anyone look so at home at heights. Not even people with quirks that allowed them to fly. He briefly wondered if the boy would get along with hawks. Once their snack breaks came around, Ken couldn't help but ask the boy questions on the past. He wasn't even asking about heroes, though it was a fascinating topic. He wanted to know about the actual history of the time. What are the main differences in the culture and practices you've noticed? He asked as he took another bite of his food. Well, I was in America, so I'm not sure how much things have changed over there. But in general, I think a lot has stayed the same. Technology was advancing really fast. Did you know the cell phone went from this big, old, clunky thing to smartphones that we've got today in just a few decades? He grinned as the teachers blinked in surprise. Wait, really? I mean, I know people say that technology was advancing really fast, but... Kayama looked down at her iPhone. Yeah. And some independent inventors were coming up with some crazy awesome stuff, like virtual reality, self-driving smart cars, smart homes, some new phones that could unlock by facial recognition too. It was kind of scary, really. Honestly, quirks have pushed humankind backwards, Aizawa sighed as he ate his meal. Yeah, no joke. Midoriya shook his head. I mean, the League had teleportation technology and everything. They could teleport back to their home base, which was actually in space floating around Earth's orbit. So, you know, I've been there a few times. You went to space? Ken blinked in shock. Mankind hadn't been to space since quirks came about. Everyone had been more interested in exploring genetics than exploring the universe. Yeah. I even met a few aliens, like Martian Manhunter. He's pretty cool. My niece Megan is a really good friend of mine. Martians? Aizawa blinked, and Ken was afraid that the kid might have broken him for a moment. The use of present tense saddened him, though. Yes? Actually, I forget I said anything. I don't know how much you can handle right now. Midoriya quickly changed topics, saving the undercaffeinated teacher from his new migraine. So, you wanted to know about some history stuff, right? It was one of my worst subjects, but I can answer on it what I can. Not a lot of information on the wars of that time period remain. You managed to write a detailed report of World War II. Were those wars taught to you in school? He was curious. These days, kids were taught about the quirk wars and how they affected the world as they know it. The world wars were talked about briefly, but only historians really researched them to know enough about them. Yeah, we were taught pretty much in depth about them. Pictures, videos, interviews. Bruce even took me to one of the camps once so I could see. A somewhat haunted look entered his eyes as a shiver ran down the boy's spine. I could still feel the echoes of the lives lost there. What happened was terrible. A lot of evil that was done erased from history. It was more than just killing. There was so much torture that went on. Dehumanization, experimentation. I may not have seen it firsthand, but the echoes of that were enough to give me nightmares. It reminded me why I need to protect as many people as I can. How simple words can change the course of an entire future. If you're comfortable with it, could you possibly write down some of what history has forgotten? Ken spoke back up. He was horrified, of course. All who really knew about World War II nowadays was who participated and that it was bad. The specifics on what had happened to the people who had been carted off to the camps were long lost to time, unfortunately. Yeah, there were a bunch of things I can remember that I can find documentation on anymore. Unfortunately, it'll mostly be from America's side of things, but that's better than nothing, right? Midoriya grinned, and Ken found himself smiling back. This kid was so happy. It was nice. He greatly enjoyed his company. He couldn't stop the happy grin on his face as Midoriya went off on an excited tangent, even if he knew Aizawa hated the topic. Izuku was a very busy boy. While his classmates spent their free time studying hero class, sparring with each other, and practicing their quirks, or just lazing off in the case of some, Izuku was hard at work, training with the teachers. He was allowed to call most of them by their civilian names in private, though few remained stubbornly silent on theirs. Not that Izuku minded, though. People were entitled to their privacy, and Robin, of all people, knew how important a civilian name could be. Today, Izuku was eating his bento with the staff again. His classmates were still at hero training, but Izuku had finished up his Friday training with Nezu early, so he decided to drop in and spend some time with his new friends, even if they were a lot older than him. Hey, sharpshooter, how's your day been? Snipe asked with a casual smile. Not that Izuku could see it, but he could tell. Same as ever, he smiled back. Just thought I'd drop in for a late lunch. Do you mind? Nah, no. Make yourself comfortable. Snipe went back to grading his papers as Izuku settled himself down. Hey, little listener, what you doing today? Yamada asked as he took a seat next to Izuku with a grin. Izuku laughed as the blonde ruffled his hair playfully. Izuku had half a mind to mess up the hero's cockatoo-like hairstyle in retaliation. I'm good. Nezu decided to let me out of lessons early, he grinned. So I decided to stop by and eat a late lunch. You better be eating at lunch, too, 13 warned in their seat. Don't worry. I've always got that one covered, Izuku laughed. Damn, I would have paid to see something like that. Hisashi laughed, too. 13 and Snipe chuckled, and Kon just smirked. Sounds like he's taken quite the liking to you. Kon scratched at his white hair with a grin. I know. That's so unlike Shota. He must really care about you, little listener. Hisashi's grin was nearly blinding, so Izuku decided to go back to eating. Stop talking about me when I'm not here. Aizawa glared at Hisashi as he walked in the room. Oh, so we can talk about you now that you are here, right? Izuku smirked, ducking under the warning swat from his dark-haired sensei. Whoa, someone's not feeling the Aster today. Aster? Hisashi raised an eyebrow. It's a word I made up, opposite of disaster, you know? Kids. Hisashi shook his head. Well, don't you start. You are a kid. Aizawa huffed, taking a seat on Izuku's other side. Izuku had quickly gotten used to the way the two bantered, and enjoyed joining in. He was getting close to the staff rather quickly. He wondered how long it would take for Nezu to offer him a teaching position once he graduated. Over the last week or so, the student body had found that Izuku was quirkless. Many of them, Janet especially, didn't take kindly to him stealing a hero course spot. Unfortunately, the kids in UA were a lot more careful about how they bullied Izuku. Nothing physical, nothing substantial. It was quiet. The looks, the mutters, the way that the kids cut him off at line or blocked him from entering the library, mostly just acting like he didn't exist. Others would glare, but they didn't dare do anything more, for fear of the hero finding out. Heroes had a knack for showing up whenever there was trouble, after all. So, in short, it wasn't really as bad as Izuku was used to. There was nothing physical, and at most, there were death threats and go-kill-yourself notes alongside with people messing up with his things, if he left them unattended for too long. He did notice that nothing happened when he left his stuff with his classmates, so he was pretty sure that no one in his homeroom was out to get him, which was a nice change. Even Mineta seemed to warm up at him after the USJ incident. He wasn't all too bothered by it, having gotten used to much worse in middle school. He threw away the notes without a second thought. He'd long ago stocked up his school supplies and always brought extras, which he hid in various locations around the classroom. He learned at young to keep anything of importance on his person or at home, so nothing was really stolen either. That in mind, the thought of reporting the behavior to the teachers never once crossed his thoughts. To Izuku, it was manageable and tame, nothing worth mentioning in the least. Izuku stayed another half an hour after the bell rang to hang out with the teachers before making his way home with a spring in his step. Halfway before making it home, his phone buzzed. Mom. Izuku, how was school? I'm going to be spending the weekend with Mitsuki. Winky face. Guess who's been home early? I hope you and your father have a wonderful time together. Love you, honey. Izuku froze mid-step. It wasn't that he was particularly afraid of his father. He'd seen scarier shit as Robin, after all. But he was afraid of what his father could do, specifically to his mother. When Izuku was little, before he'd been sent to his past, his father had regularly beaten and abused him, whenever he had the chance. His mother never knew, and Hisashi made sure Izuku knew. Accidental slips to other people were met with accidental drunk rages on his mother, after which he'd apologize profusely for, and she'd forgive, because she was far too nice. He promised that if Izuku ever went and told someone purposefully, or slipped into a hero, that Izuku would meet a very painful end. After he'd returned from the past, he'd gained a lot more self-confidence. He'd put up a fight, only for him to pull out that old threat again. Of course, as for Robin, he'd collected a ton of evidence against this man. He was fully intending on sending the files to the police and the heroes, until he name-dropped the rumored god of the underworld. Listen here, you little shit, Hisashi growled. His mother was out shopping, so it was just the two of them home. Dick glared right back at the man he'd once called his father. I don't have to listen to you anymore. I've got more than enough evidence. If you talk to me or my mother again, I'll make sure that I'll send it to every hero and police agency in Japan. If you make a single move against me, boy, and I'll not only make sure that Inko ends up dead, but that you'll end up in a state worse than death. I've got connections. Connections, huh? That makes two of us. Dick grinned. His little 10-year-old body was extremely short, and he couldn't fight as well as he was used to, because he was still getting used to shorter limbs. But he'd be damned if he let himself be manipulated like this. That quirk really changed you, huh, Bryant? Fine. You want to go against me? Listen here. I'm not your father. Dick blinked in surprise. Well, that's a relief. But I work for him. He gave me orders a decade ago to watch over his son and steer him away from the wrong path. Dick snorted. Yeah, you've done a swell job of that. Your father is a villain, boy, and he expects you to follow in his footsteps. Perhaps you've heard his name. Hisashi grinned a sickening grin. All for one. Dick went stiff and pale. He'd heard that name before. All for One was something like the villain equivalent to All Might. He was the rumored god of the criminal underworld, and was definitely someone you didn't want to cross. The man had connections, and Dick was fairly certain he'd made several hundred heroes disappear and to look like accidents. He needed to do more in-depth research, but right now, as he was, he didn't have the connections to take on a villain like this. He clenched his fists in frustration. So you do know that. If I disappear, you'll go to his custody, and Inko will die. I'll make sure of it. So, boy, you won't be sending in those files. Things will stay exactly as they are now, and the day you graduate high school, or the day I end up dead or arrested, you will become a villain under his tutelage. Do I make myself clear? Dick clenched his fists. There were so many uncontrollable variables right now. He didn't have much of a choice here. If he made his move and arrested Hisashi, his real biological father would kidnap him and kill his mother. And Midori Izuku was just a quirkless kid right now. Nobody would search for him. He didn't have enough connections. Yet. Yes, sir. Good. Hisashi grinned. Now, you've been bad. Time for your punishment. He just needed to hold out until he made it to UA. The school was notoriously protective of their students, even the Gen Ed ones. And if he got into the hero course, then they'd surely notice a kid going missing. He'd stay put right now. But when the time was right, he'd strike. He was a robin, after all. And a bat had a lot of patience. Izuku clenched his phone in his hand as he stood before the apartment door. It looked like today would finally be the day. By this time tomorrow, it was highly likely he'd be in villain custody. I just have to hold on. He took a deep breath to steel himself. Surely, One for All has nothing on the Joker anyways. Right? And that was A Robin's Nest, Chapter 9, Training by SilvermistAnimeLover, read to you by Artemis_anime. I am so sorry for all of the delays I've had in posting this. Things have been really crazy around here, and things just got out of hand, and things have been very stressful. So I'm sorry that I haven't been able to post, and hopefully I will go back to my usual posting next week. Thank you all for all of your patience. I really appreciate it. Bye.